Scott did this whole show on, I guess, his podcast, denouncing me and lying about me. Why should I give him a platform here? The same with Swig.
Welcome to the Ayn Rand Fan Club. I'm Scott Schiff along with William Swig. William, how are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good, good. Well, that is from the show 2 days after Yaron banned me, and that was the day he banned you. You showed up. You couldn't last long after he banned me, but we wanted to, we had this whole other show planned on perfection. We're still going to get to that, but, just him accusing us of lying. I mean, we're basing our comments off of his video clip. So he's telling you not to believe your lying ears.
Yeah, we did that show. It was number 69, so you can go back and listen to it. It's called Yaron Smears Scott. And in that show, we made an argument presenting a lot of evidence from his podcast that he arbitrarily and emotionally smears Scott, and he is bad for the movement, bad for the objectivist movement. I don't think he liked that very much. I happen to think it was the final straw that caused him to ban me, at least. Maybe not you, because you have more interactions with him. But for me, when I tried to go into his chat room recently, I didn't get out of the starting gate. I just made some comment about Nikki Haley and how he liked Nikki Haley before, but she's still a dope. She was always a dope. And then he banned me, or he was fumbling around for a while trying to ban me. So I think he technically hid my account so that even though I can type in the chat room, nobody else can see it. So I just decided to unsubscribe from his channel. I won't be posting in the chat room under any account.
Well, the ban is so ridiculous. It's like trying to ban someone from watching a TV show. I mean, YouTube is still available. It just, is about typing in the chat. But, we had been building, and we've got some clips of how it had been building up since that show. But this was the show after Trump got shot for me. So I told someone it was probably going to happen that morning. I just, I was pissed that the shooting happened, and Yaron was pissed that it makes Trump more likely to win, I guess. But I got to start with this one clip out of order from a few days before the banning, when he says, "I'm the worst thing for the movement." So eat your hearts out, David Kelley and the Libertarians.
Scott does more damage to our cause than anybody else I can think of right now, because he is affiliated with Trump. It's, again, not that he is saying, well, I have no choice, I'll vote for Trump, but that he promotes Trump, he advocates for Trump, he associates himself with Trump, and Trump stands in for a bunch of people. He's a Trump apologist. He will justify anything Trump does, and in that sense, he is a destructive force within, call it the movement. You're not just a Trump voter. If you were just a Trump voter, you wouldn't be on here defending everything Trump says and everything Trump does. You are much, much worse than a Trump voter. Trump voters I have nothing against.
Did you see him bob his head after he said he has nothing against Trump voters? I mean, even he doesn't believe it.
Yeah, he almost was going to clarify that, but then he decided not to.
I mean, he says it's about me being a Trump apologist. One of our fans, Mike K, had this great quote, coming back to these objectivists, that, and I don't need to couch my advocacy to you in sobbing regret at my choice. And that just, he's looking for some sort of wanting to virtue signal for the other objectivists that, we still can see Trump as bad. Yes, Trump got rolled by Fauci, but, that's, I mean, Yaron, it goes easy on Fauci as far as I'm concerned anyway. So that's not, he just doesn't appreciate the things I'm against Trump on.
Yeah, well, Mike makes a good point. very much in line with my thinking. I call it the disclaimer mentality, where you're always disclaiming things. You're up front, you're saying what you don't like about someone before you'll say anything positive. And so he thinks that as Trump voters, we need to always be disclaiming him before we say, regretfully, I have to vote for him or something like that. It's a really messed up psychology. It's a messed up mode of persuasion. How are you going to persuade someone to vote for Trump if you're always disclaiming him and pointing out the negatives? Of course there's negatives to Trump, but it's up to his opponents to point those out during campaign season. I mean, why should we be pointing out all the negatives? We're trying to get him elected. We don't like.
Yeah, Yaron wants to demonstrate to him that we, are holding our nose or, have to feel guilty about it, some sort of original Trump sin. But, now that I'm banned, I don't have to hold back anymore and can say that I truly think Yaron's got the worst case of TDS in the movement. And I define Trump derangement syndrome as having so much hate for Trump that it clouds one's objectivity.
Well, it certainly clouds his objectivity. I mean, here we go again with the whole Trump apologist smear. He's using this again. He used this in the last election cycle. He tried to call Trump supporters apologists, as if we support everything Trump does. And he doesn't understand the concept of apologist. He's using it incorrectly again. And he didn't learn his lesson last time. So now here we go again, having to deal with this nonsense. Apparently, according to Yaron, you're allowed to vote for Trump. It's okay if you just vote for him, but you can't defend your vote. How ridiculous is that? You can't defend your vote for Trump?
I'm on the record backing DeSantis in the primary. I thought he was better on COVID.
Yeah, so there's plenty of evidence that neither one of us is some Trump sycophant who just believes everything Trump does is gold. We're not in that camp, and I don't think very many people are. I think most people just hate the left so much that they see Trump is better than the left, and so he's the obvious choice.
Yeah, but I mean, from someone that has TDS, everyone else that likes him is some sort of Trump apologist. It's the other side of the dichotomy. But I just want to offer this one quick clip as an example of, so I'm not just throwing out a charge without anything to back it up.
In anything positive you think about Trump is not true. It's just absolutely not true. It happened. Anything good that happened in spite of Trump, not because of Trump.
So I I mean, anything that he did is in spite of him, not because of him. He also has this kind of Netanyahu derangement syndrome, which was a big part of what I think finally led him to banning at least me from his show. So
yeah,
I think that because he thinks I'm the worst thing hurting the cause, I think a show on what has actually been hurting the movement would be illuminating. I also think there's a place for a show on the phenomenon of TDS, how to define it, is it a fair charge, and even what are some similarities we see among those who we accuse of it.
Well, yeah, I agree. There's plenty of content there for many different shows. But getting back to him calling you a destructive force, I think it's curious that, a few months ago, maybe a couple months ago, we did that show on him being the destructive force in objectivism, and we made our case for that. And then suddenly now he's accusing you of being the destructive force. So
right now, you use that language more than me. I think I may have been being too, still deferential.
Yeah, I think I'm the one who first brought it up in that episode. Yaron Smear Scott.
I was sanctioning it for sure.
Yeah, I think you pretty much either agreed with me or implicitly agreed with me, because we made a pretty clear case that he's not good for the movement. But whether he's the worst destructive force in the movement. That there's a case to be made for that. I think a more philosophical person at ARI would be maybe more to blame, but Yaron's definitely the front and center face of the movement, so he's got a lot of blame.
Well, we've got a segment on that where he discusses some of his mistakes later in the show. And, when he erased that show, don't believe your lying ears either. So, your lying eyes. So, but, people ask why I went to his chat. And part of it is the original charge against David Kelley, which was basically don't misrepresent Rand. And I don't think David Kelley's done that near as much as Yaron. He misrepresents Rand on all sorts of things, just caving to the establishment, going easy on Fauci, like I talked about. So, there was some just showing the animosity building up to the ban, I think also offers some clues into your own thinking. I think a couple of weeks ago, Snopes, the left-leaning fact-checking site, recently came out admitting that Trump didn't mean white supremacists when he said there were good people on both sides. And, I think it was your own TDS that led him to do a show about the quote-unquote full context, which, people can listen to the show and decide for themselves. But to me, his main argument was basically that no good people should have been defending the Robert E. Lee statue. And he's already pissed at me for not blanket condemning everyone who didn't want the statues removed. When I say in the chat that I want to get conservatives and libertarians closer together, and he smears me again as saying that I want neo-Nazis and white supremacists.
I mean, what Scott really wants is the neo-Nazis and the white supremacists and objectivists and libertarians and conservatives and Make America Great Again people all to be in one big, nice trend. He wants to march shoulder to shoulder with the neo-Nazis and the white supremacists. And I'm using Scott here as an example for millions of people out there. Not millions, and because he considers himself or gives lip service to objectivism, but so here he's just an example of the kind of insanity that will kill whatever rational movement can actually be created in this country.
So this charge goes back a long way to the days of Charlottesville, and seems like he's still trying to compare you to neo-Nazis and say you're in favor of marching with neo-Nazis. I'd like to know whether he thinks this charge still applies at all, or if it ever applied. Like, who are these neo-Nazis that you're buddying up with? I mean, the people who simply because you wanted to keep the Confederate statues, that makes you a neo-Nazi? I think there's a historical precedence for keeping certain statues. It's a local issue. So if the locals want to keep the statues up, that's their deal. So, I mean, it doesn't mean that they're Nazis just because they understand history. They understand history and they want to maintain that memory. And, maybe Robert E. Lee wasn't exactly, the devil. He's a general, well-respected general.
He was one of Eisenhower's top 4 Americans.
Yeah, it's a little weird to say you're a Nazi if you want to keep a statue of Lee around. I mean, if you wanted a statue of like some KKK wizard, Grand Wizard, that would be something else, I guess. But Robert E. Lee wasn't exactly a leader of the KKK.
I mean, the whole reason I'm so against woke is that I see them using this double standard bigotry charge saying the historically marginalized can do whatever they want as a way to shut people down. I mean, I'd hate to hear how Yaron would sound if he just adopted the left's talking points of calling his opponents racists. I mean, that's basically what he was doing by saying I wanted to march with, Nazis and white supremacists. But the real kicker...
He has to use these generalized smears against you because he doesn't want to get into the details. So when you're not about looking at the particulars, you're just about hasty generalizations and arbitrary smears. So calling someone a racist is a very easy thing to do. And then calling someone a neo-Nazi is an easy thing to do. Like if your enemy is the racist, you know, because you're not a racist, right? And racists are bad, racists are evil. Therefore, anyone who's against you must be a racist. You know, it's just sloppy thinking, sloppy generalizations.
He's
They,
seen the left use it to shut other people down, and he's like, "Oh, I can use that to shut down people I disagree with." But I asked him a question during that show, and I have to credit my wife for the question. I asked, you know, why wasn't objectivism calling for the Confederate statues to be removed years ago? And I don't think he has a great answer.
Scott says, why wasn't objectivism calling for these Confederate statues to be removed 20, 30 years ago instead of waiting for the Dems to demand it? Didn't think of it. Didn't think of it. But every time I walk by one of those statues at Clemson University or at the University of Texas in Austin or at Virginia, I cringed. I never thought of they should be taken down, never thought of making it an issue. My bad, I guess. I don't know why other people didn't, but they should have taken them down.
Oops, my bad. So his cover story is that the left just so happened to make him think to pronounce moral judgment on statues, even though he claims he didn't like them before either. I mean, this to me is such a clear example of what caving to the left but not admitting it sounds like. He's not trying to shape the culture. He's letting the establishment shape him.
well, he's not thinking. He admitted to not thinking. So he cringes, but you know, when you cringe at something, you're supposed to start thinking. You know, why am I cringing at this? What's the deal here? And so he's just admitting to evading his own reactions and his own thoughts. And then he thinks it's okay to remove the statue. So he's like, oh, I should have done that, you know, and he's still, again, he's not thinking. So he doesn't have a reason for why they should be removed. It's just the left, you know, trained him to think that way. And so he agrees, oh, bad person, remove statue, you know, bad data, you get bad input, you get a bad output. He's just receiving bad information from the left, and he's spouting out bad information based on that. So
I don't know. I don't
Go
know
ahead.
if you remember this, but Yaron has also said that he wished Ayn Rand had said more against redlining. I mean, he would even throw her under the bus not to have wokes think him racially insensitive.
Yeah, I think that comes from ARI intellectuals and Yaron deviating from Rand's basic principles. So, you know, they're deviating from the basic principle of reason. They're not thinking, they're not applying logic to objective facts. They're just going into more and more fantasy and more unrealistic ideas.
They're trying to get along in a woke world.
Yeah, I mean, it also goes down to the fact that the ARI is a nonprofit entity. They've got to try to maintain that status. And so they have to somehow be in good graces with the establishment, or at least the IRS, in order to maintain that status. So they can't do certain things. And maybe that's preventing them from following the trajectory that Rand had the movement on. You know, I don't think the Rand's trajectory was going the way of ARI. I think it was going the way of something else.
That's fair. Another marker was on July 3rd. He was talking about conservatives complaining about Taylor Swift, but then has to stop himself because I'm on the chat and, you know, making him be too careful with his words.
Some people I have to be careful because Scott is on the chat catching me at every word, right? When you say the right, do you mean everybody on the right? When you say alt-right, who do you mean exactly? Give me names, give me statistics. How many people hold this? Anyway.
I'm wondering, why isn't Yaron catching himself with every word? He's like relying on you to be in the chat in order to check his premises.
I mean, I remember when objectivism used to care about precision, but I mean, what's happened is he strawmans Candace Owens as the entire conservative movement to rationalize caving to the Democrats again. And then, I'm calling him out on it, saying she's not all of conservatism. But, it's got to be so great that I'm not there harassing him now by asking for precision in his comments. He doesn't have to be so careful with his flock that apparently, loves sloppy, disingenuous terminology.
Well, there won't be any checking of his facts anymore or challenging of his propositions. That's what really, I think that's what really caused him to dislike you, is that you were that thorn in his side saying that doesn't make sense. Check this. What about this fact that doesn't mesh with what you're saying? So
He
it's
claims he likes disagreement, but I was too, dishonest or, whatever his charge was.
I think one half of him likes disagreement because he recognizes the importance of critics, at least objective critics or reasonable critics. He understands that, but the emotional side of him doesn't want that, because you act as a mirror, and then he sees his faults, he sees his own flaws, and then he can't handle it because he's being embarrassed in front of his chat room, or his audience. And so
Yeah.
really what he's saying there in that clip is that I don't want much reason coming at me. He's kind of like demonizing reason, like pointing out things to him, like checking his words, like he mentions catching himself with his words. That's reason, that's thinking, that's critical analysis. And he doesn't like that. He's sort of like demonizing that. And so in a sense, he's demonizing reason, which is the logical follow-up of evading reason.
And I'm the stand-in for it.
Yeah, well, you're an archetype now for reason.
That's right. He said I'd graduated to an archetype and I was a symbol. But it was really on July 10th that things heated up. And that's the clip that we played earlier about me being the worst thing for the movement. There's a little backstory because one of his listeners came on to your post about the episode of Yaron smearing me. And this guy basically was defending Yaron, saying that, well, if what Yaron said is true, that Trump has held back the movement for decades, then maybe, Yaron wasn't smearing you enough. And I was just saying that was absurd. I don't know that I'd actually heard Yaron make that specific charge, but he went in and asked Yaron about that. And, he claimed, yes, that, Trump has hurt the free market movement, sucked all the air out of it, which I think reveals a kind of professional jealousy. It also makes him hate Peterson, Rogan, just about anyone more successful that won't have him on their podcast. I end up bringing, go ahead.
He's so delusional now that anybody who claims to be a fan of Ayn Rand or be influenced by Ayn Rand, they're now affiliated with the objectivist movement and are like spokespersons for it. And so anything negative about them reflects on the movement, when this is ridiculous. I mean, any rational person would know that, like Lex Friedman or Jordan Peterson or Donald Trump, these aren't representatives of Ayn Rand's philosophy. These people are just influenced. There's people who've been influenced by lots of thinkers, a mishmash of thinkers. And then there are objectivists, people who claim to be following the ideas of Ayn Rand or the philosophy. And he's conflating these people. He's like conflating the two types of people because he can't get into particulars. This is a major problem with Yaron. He's way too much into these hasty generalizations or broad generalizations that aren't grounded in reality, that aren't grounded in particular facts. So that's his main problem, as I see it, that he just refuses to get into the details.
Yeah, or he wrote the details in his mind a generation ago, and he's decided, that's always going to be the truth, no matter what additional evidence. I'm thinking of something specific because I bring up that Obama trashed Rand which he keys off of to claim how great it was to have Obama trashing Rand for book sales.
We're growing, primarily because we've got more intellectuals, but we're growing slower than if we hadn't had Trump. Obama trashing Rand in public was fantastic. That was great. Book sales. I actually had a graph of this at the time. I said Obama's the best thing that ever happened to Ayn Rand, because when Obama trashed it, book sales went through the roof. This is, because Scott said Obama trashed Rand publicly, but this is Scott's stupidity. He can't understand this, right? That Obama trashing Rand is good. Rand is never associated with the left. Never been associated with the left. So when a leftist trashes Rand, people go, I wonder why they think she's that important that they need a trasher. Let me go read her. And they do. But when Rand is associated with Trump, people go, Trump? She must be awful. I don't want to read her.
So what he's saying is just not factually accurate. Now, I agree that Yaron claimed and even believed that it helped book sales at the time, but he made those comments in 2012, and maybe there was a slight peak, but according to Barney, who is still very close with Leonard Peikoff and would have access to the numbers, book sales peaked around 2012. Now, 4 years later, Yaron was ready to blame someone, and he decided to arbitrarily blame Trump, just because, and now he's got a new boogeyman for why the movement's not growing. Now it's me. I mean, the president trashing Trump is great for Rand, but, a candidate praising her is bad. I mean, he just wants to back the left, and I just think he fills in the rest as he goes.
Well, this is obvious rationalization for his point or his proposition. But I wouldn't hold my breath waiting for him to look at the details, to look at the book sales numbers and years, dates and everything. That's not going to happen.
Nah, that's way too specific.
If he's wrong, we'll never hear about it again. And then if he's right, he'll pull up some numbers or something, and then we'll have to deal with that. But I don't think he's right. I think it's a ludicrous proposition that Obama trashing Rand makes her more popular, and then Trump makes her books more popular, and then Trump saying he likes Howard Rourke and the Fountainhead makes that book less attractive. Liberals hate everything about Trump. Why are they going to focus in on the one thing he says about Rand? That's ludicrous. He thinks everyone on the left is going to hate Rand because Trump likes Howard Rourke. That's ridiculous. I mean, a lot of people like Howard Rourke, and it's anyone with any size of a brain knows that just because some guy likes likes a character in a book, that doesn't mean that the book's bad or that you shouldn't read the book or you shouldn't like it. Obama, I'm sure, likes certain books that I don't like, or maybe I do like. It just depends on the book. It's like this again. This is him not getting into the details.
Here's the bottom line: if I'm the thing that's ruining objectivism, and Trump is the thing ruining objectivism, and you're the thing ruining objectivism, then it can hardly be his fault as the president and CEO of ARI at the time.
Well, yeah, like we said before, this is psychological projection. Like we did the show on how he's bad for the movement, and now he's trying to bounce it back at us and say we're the problem. I mean,
I like to and people said I was having no effect on the movement.
Yeah. He's trying to smear you with this attack, and it's just his way of arbitrarily making some character attack against you, and it doesn't even make sense because he doesn't have any evidence. He doesn't point to any specific thing. He'll never do an analysis of our episode, like we did of his.
No, I don't expect him to. He thinks he's over and above us anyway. Plus, it's actually difficult to answer. But
well, that's the contradiction there. If we're below him and he's not going to punch down, then why is he always attacking you on his episode? Why doesn't he
He'd
just
say it's
ignore?
because I came in his chat, but I was there defending Rand and her not being misrepresented as an establishment shill. But
It's okay to punch down at you if you're in his chat room, but it's not okay to actually come to actually show clips from our podcast or deal with our quotes and what we actually say and what we actually argue. That's too
their
much.
whole way has been to just ignore those people. Don't read Brandon. Don't read Kelley. That's how they handle people they've ousted. They don't even want Biddle brought up. He's closed.
Well, they're mirror breakers. I bet every mirror in Yaron's house is broken. He can't stand a reflection of himself.
Well, I want to get into the show before Trump's shooting on July 12th, and Yaron and I had already gotten into it in the past because he tries to hold Netanyahu responsible for October 7th, which I think is ridiculous. And it's just he's got Netanyahu derangement syndrome. He says, "Oh, I've hated Bibi for years," and he gets a question from his audience about how they're not sure it's fair to blame Bibi for 10/7, which is a subtle way of saying he agrees with my previous pushback on your own. So, he really, I think he's already pissed. And then when he starts talking about how Bibi was responsible for 14 years of neglect, I call it 14 years of peace, which he really doesn't care for.
God, I mean, Scott's opinion about this issue is lower and beneath his contemptible position on Trump. It's just some saw that as 14 years apiece. Scott says, who's completely ignorant of the crisis and completely ignorant of what was going on in Israel, is completely ignorant of the situation. He can sit in his armchair in the United States and say, oh, it was peaceful for 14 years. And therefore, my guy, Netanyahu, who I like and therefore will justify and make excuses for till my last breath, oh, he brought about peace. It's disgusting. So I don't know what to tell you, Harper. I've said what I have to say. I don't understand how you can hold politicians accountable for anything if you can't hold Netanyahu accountable for October 7th. Then they're just not accountable for anything.
That might be the grandest hasty generalization of them all. Like, if you can't hold Netanyahu accountable for October 7th, you can't hold politicians accountable for anything. How crazy is that?
He doesn't know me. I did a radio show in Kansas City from 2000 to 2004 during the Second Intifada. I spent a ton of time learning about Israel's history, but he's more interested in proving he's been right to hate Bibi all this time, and it just it's a ridiculous smear that I don't know what I'm talking about. 14 years is actually a pretty good run for Israel's history.
Well, again, he just speaks in these wild generalizations. You completely are ignorant of the situation, right? So he's just blanket smearing you, blanket smearing your curiosity, your intelligence, your investigative abilities. But also, he seems to be victim blaming a bit here. Netanyahu represents a large portion of the Israeli citizenship, and he's saying that Netanyahu is the problem, or was accountable for the Hamas attacks. And so that kind of means that all the people who support Netanyahu are equally to blame, because they support this guy. He's their leader, and he's the one who's the problem here. So
yeah, you're right. If you follow the logic, if they continue to vote for him, he's going to blame the Israeli people.
And these are the victims. I mean, these are the victims of the attack. And it seems very crude and unthinking and heartless on his part to come out with this attack, saying that the victims are actually to blame. It's kind of like saying because the woman was powerless and she got raped, it's her fault because she didn't do anything. She didn't fight back. That's how heartless is that? I mean,
The Jewish left sees offering up Bibi as a way to seem like they're not too pro-Israel. And, that's, the Democrats and people out there, you've seen even Schumer calling for his resignation. And so that mentality exists. I don't necessarily think that of Yaron. I truly believe with Yaron, it's that he's hated Netanyahu for years and just wants to prove that he was right to hate him.
Yeah, well, I'm not an expert on Netanyahu. I don't claim to be. I don't have a whole lot of interest in the Israeli situation, but I know when I see a barbarian attack, and I know when I see a fairly westernized, civilized country being attacked by barbarians, and I know which side you got to choose in that case. And you don't come out and blame the victim in that situation. That's totally, it's totally not a good thing to do, not proper rhetoric in the situation. Even if it were true, that Netanyahu shares some of the blame, which I don't think is true. Even if that were true, why would you say that in this situation? That seems ridiculous. It's not going to help anything.
Well, so I'm already upset, and just after this, he's trying to blame Trump for inflation, saying you have to judge. So I just type in the chat, judge the left, which prompts this reply.
I've judged the left as evil. I've judged the left every single show. I judge the left. They're evil. It's just boring to say that because everybody who listens to my show knows that already. Judge the left. Again, you're so dishonest, Scott. That's what really creeps me out, is how dishonest you are, how you don't have any problem, just bold-faced lies and misrepresentations.
So he claims he judges them every single show while simultaneously saying it's too boring to talk about them. But he accuses me of lying. I'm being 100% honest when I say I think he goes too easy on the left.
So he enjoys boring himself to death. He talks about this boring thing on a daily basis, which must mean he enjoys being bored. Right? That's the logic of his weird rhetoric there.
I guess, yeah.
The fact is,
even though they're telling him not to, that it's boring, he's still doing it anyway, even in a way that's imperceptible to me.
Yeah, his idea of judging the left is saying they're evil.
They're socialists. It's just like this blanket, but you can see who he's saving his real venom for. When he says he's ready to dedicate his show to, one of his life goals is going after Tucker Carlson or Donald Trump or Bibi Netanyahu.
Right. The focus of his attacks are the right. Sometimes he'll attack the left or attack Biden or somebody specific on the left, but usually it's only when it's dominating the news, because he's really news dependent and mass media news dependent.
Right.
He'll look at CNN or whatever, NPR or whatever, MSNBC, and then he'll pick a topic that's dominating the news, and that's how he tries to get viewers, attract viewers. He's mostly trying to get subscribers and views, and so he's news dependent. News cycle.
And it's the Dispatch, it's the New York Times, it's the Bulwark, it's they got to be never Trumpers for the reading.
Yeah, and since the news he's watching is dominated by Trump haters, his rhetoric on his show is always going to be dominated by hating Trump. He's just in that. He's stuck in that mold. He's in the echo chamber of the mass media. He's in the echo chamber of his chat, who he's cultivated to hate Trump. So he's just stuck in a world of his own making.
It might be more understandable if one of their main charges against people are they're being too conventional or they're not radical.
Yeah, but whatever happened to that? Whatever happened to being radical?
So that was Yaron's last public show before Trump got shot. And by the time he does the next show, I'd already had to block some other person I'd gotten into it. I knew nerves were frayed, and and he's doing the show, and he's already pissing me off by he seems to be almost giving the shooter tips where he's like, go for the body instead of the head. So by the time he gets around to talking about conspiracy theories about Trump staging the shooting, I add an admittedly snarky, yeah, that would be like blaming Bibi for October 7th. And apparently that was the straw.
But figured maybe he would make it into the history books better if he shot the future president of the United States. All right, Scott, go to hell. I mean, that is so stupid.
If Trump can take a bullet from me, I can take a band from Yaron.
Well, let's hope he didn't take the bullet for you. But
well, I saw other people that weekend saying the same thing. It's like, if Trump can take a bullet for me, I can be public about my support for Trump.
there was nothing wrong about that. And I don't know why he's what was he fiddling around there trying to hide your account or something?
Yeah, that's the moment he was actually blocking me. So later in the show, he's asked about it. He claims it was more about his nerves and my ugly soul. I mean, the next show he's asked about ugly souls, and he just starts talking out of his ass like it's a new philosophic principle. And to be fair, his audience actually starts pushing back about him psychologizing me, but he answers by rationalizing psychologizing in my case.
I can psychologize around Scott because I know Scott from his behavior. If I see somebody's behavior over and over and over again, then yeah, I can absolutely psychologize about them.
This is like when he was saying that I had a well-deserved smear.
Yeah.
And this is now saying that, because Rand's the psychology of psychologizing, I mean, claiming to know someone isn't even an excuse to her. This is from her piece. Armed with a smattering, not of knowledge, but of undigested slogans, they rush unsolicited to diagnose the problems of their friends and acquaintances. Pretentiousness and presumptuousness are the psychologizer's invariable characteristics. He not merely invades the privacy of his victims' minds, he claims to understand their minds better than they do, to know more than they do about their own motives. With reckless irresponsibility, which an old-fashioned mystic oracle would hesitate to match, he ascribes to his victims any motivation that suits his purpose, ignoring their denials. I mean, Yaron doesn't know me. If he did, he should realize why I'm pissed at him, because he's misrepresenting Ayn Rand as his excuse to cave to a woke establishment that he admits has been winning for 100 years. And I think it's to gain mainstream acceptance and get published in the Atlantic.
Well, I'm sure he'd like to be published in the Atlantic.
He said so.
Why is he psychologizing you in this instance, and why was that the last straw? Those are my questions of curiosity. I think that on some level he thinks he knows you based on what you say, but he doesn't really provide evidence. He just sort of says you're stupid and doesn't provide the evidence.
Don't forget dishonest.
Yeah, he doesn't really provide the evidence in a verbal form. So it's like he's having like a one-sided conversation if you're just watching the podcast, because they don't leave the chats up after the podcast is published. So you can't revisit the chat room and see what was being said. And also after he hides your account or bans you, no one else can see what you said. So he's presenting this one-sided take, and all his audience knows now is that you're stupid. He thinks you're stupid. And so
he's convinced himself, and any of his unquestioning believers will also accept that. Now,
yeah, are you stupid or are you dishonest? Are you there? Are you like this troll trying to fool him and take him down or something, or are you just dumb?
Whichever answer will get them to stop listening to me.
And why would you ban a dumb person? That makes you look better. You know, why, if you have some dumb guy spouting nonsense in the chat room, he's an easy foil. You know, you shouldn't. Why is he getting so upset that he's got this easy dumb mess foil in his chat room to bounce his ideas off of and prove wrong? Like, you would be the representative of what's wrong and dumb and false. And so I would love to have that, you know, on my Facebook page. And to some extent, I do have a few critics on my Facebook page who say nonsensical things. Now, I don't call them names, but I do try to point out their falsehoods and how they're wrong.
Sure. Yeah, well, then the show after that one with the psychologizing, you go on there and you ended up getting yourself blocked in the process while Yaron is going on about my supposed dishonesty.
And Scott's dishonest and Swigroy just blocked. He's done some horrible things, so, you know, he doesn't deserve to be here.
Oh, yeah. So I went in there because he was talking about the Secret Service, and I was kind of curious about his take on the whole assassination attempt. And I had known beforehand that he blocked you. So I was curious to see if I was going to be able to, you know, make any comments or what was going to happen. So I went in there and I made a comment. He was talking about Nikki Haley, and I made a comment about Nikki Haley, and he like automatically started to try to ban me. Like, there were some people in there who said that he should ban me, and I guess he had decided beforehand that I was going to get banned. So he fumbled around and he ultimately hid my account so I could post in the chat, but nobody else could see me. So once I realized that, I just unsubscribed from his account, and I won't be posting in the chat room under any account name. Like, he doesn't want me in there, fine, I'm not going to be in there.
Okay.
I will try to comment on YouTube videos and maybe Facebook, but if he bans me there as well, then I just won't have much contact with him. Maybe I'll start emailing him. I don't know.
Yeah, well, you know, hey, may he treat you justly. No, I happened to see on the chat on Friday that someone there was accusing someone else of being the new Scott. It wasn't actually me, but you know, go ahead and believe that every time someone is questioning Yaron, there's a fair chance it's me.
Yeah, that's the problem with banning. This problem with banning people is you don't, especially if you're banning them for like ideological reasons and not necessarily because they're calling you names or spamming or something like that. You know, you're just banning a critic who might, you know, who then when you hear other people criticizing you, then you're going to wonder if it's the critic you ban. And so I don't want that to happen with me. So I try not to ban my critics. I want them to feel free to criticize me with using their own name. And so I don't have to worry about this whole trolling issue and whether someone's coming at me from different account names. It's not something I want to worry about.
Absolutely. Well, I do want to at least spend a little time going over the ultimate charge against Yaron that we were originally planning to do on the Perfection Show, but I do think it's relevant to what we're talking about today. That I asked him some questions about mistakes he'd made at ARI that he'd mentioned on a previous show. And I'll play some of the Facebook clip because he erased the answer from YouTube.
You want me examples? Let me think. Yeah, I mean, our first attempt to build Ayn Rand campus, I kind of left it to one of my VPs to really manage. I was afraid that the project was too complex and difficult, that we were taking a wrong angle on it, a wrong perspective on it. But I let them do it. You know, I didn't say, wait a minute, stop, we need to rethink this, this doesn't make sense. Maybe somebody, you know, I let it kind of happen. And I drove them really hard, and it was a failure that then we resurrected. We fixed it. It cost quite a bit of money. You know, I'm not sure if I intervened, the project would have been much better. But there were obvious signs that the project was going in a not so good direction, and I should have stepped in and dealt with it sooner than I did.
Well, that tells me he's capable of reflecting on his mistakes. He just doesn't like them being public. So he's willing to talk about them and answer the question. So I don't know, maybe he was given money as a super chat for answering the question. But if he's going to use this live streaming format, I think he should accept what goes along with that, which is leaving this stuff up because people paid him to answer these questions. And he also accepted that this is a live thing. There's no takebacks. But on YouTube, they allow you to edit, or I guess this was on YouTube. So they allow you to edit the content after the fact. So he took advantage of that.
I mean, I appreciate him being candid about mistakes, and I agree that, you can make mistakes along the way to even something approaching perfection, to allude to our next episode. But when you erase a 6-minute segment that just so happens to be talking about your mistakes, I mean, it undermines that he understands that mistakes are okay and might rather conceal mistakes. And that is, it's much easier to erase that and start saying that Scott's responsible for holding back objectivism, or Wiilliam is, or Trump is, or whoever it is that, he admits in another cut that he slowed some things down, that, he was not a good people manager as CEO of ARI. And we'll put up a clip to it. I mean, we're playing these clips as much to create a historical record for what he might erase once he hears that he didn't erase every copy of it out there. I mean, is it fair to say when he slowed some things that he was doing more damage to the cause, or was it still me thinking the left was a bigger threat 20 years ago?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, who's causing the most damage to the movement? Someone who's a leader at the top of the movement who makes these big mistakes, or is it some guy who's criticizing the leader of the movement? I think the leader of the movement is the one who gets looked at the most as an example, the right way to do things. So if he's making all these mistakes, he's causing the most damage. He should take some responsibility for the decline in sales or whatever he thinks is causing damage to the movement.
And if you're at the top and you think you might be blamed for it, you better find some other people to blame for it. Oh, it's the culture. Trump rose. It wasn't fair.
Yeah, well, we've dealt with that before, and it's an obvious attempt at distraction from what he's been doing. It's also just a clear case of not addressing reality. Again, Trump is not the leader of the objectivist movement. Nobody's going to mistake Trump as a representative of Ayn Rand. So unless you're a complete idiot, a complete fool, you know that Trump is Hitler. He's not Ayn Rand.
This is where, our episode on confusion, they use confusion to, they'll be confused about Trump. We got to keep back in the left.
Yeah, and by the way, for the people in our audience who don't understand a joke, Trump is not Hitler, but in the minds of Yaron's audience, he's something like a Hitler. So why would he expect anyone to mistake Trump as a representative of Ayn Rand? They must be thinking that Ayn Rand likes Hitler or something like that. So it's kind of weird.
Yeah. Well, there's a much more recent example of Yaron erasing a portion of his live streamed YouTube show. And this was with a guest. He had Bryan Caplan on, even though Bryan's an ANCAP. We'll save that for another day. But, Yaron said they wanted to focus things that they agree on, like immigration. But Bryan was asked about a recent post of his where he was praising George Walsh and telling the story about Walsh defending David Kelley to Leonard Peikoff in 1989. We can put up a link to that as well. But the newsworthy part, again, is that Yaron politely smiled, but then erased his answer. In fact, he admitted it when he was asked about it on his next episode.
Bryan mentioned seeing Dr. Peikoff at age 18. I went back to find it, but it seems to be gone. Did it get edited? Yes, it got edited out, so don't look for it because it's not there anymore. And nothing Bryan said was bad. It was just wasn't a topic. I accidentally read that question. I had an intention of not even reading it. And it wasn't, I think he said things there that I disagree with, and in a different context, I would have expressed myself, but I didn't express myself. I didn't fully give the explanation. It comes off as too that I'm agreeing with him on stuff that he's saying, and when I really am not. And I think it gives the wrong impression to the listeners. So I just took it out because I don't think it's that relevant.
So first of all, he's saying that Caplan's comments reflect on him because I guess he's there. He's the one interviewing the man. So he's got this whole sanction thing going on again.
Right.
You know, it's a sanction issue. So where he's just totally in fear of what people will think about him because Bryan Caplan said this thing on his show. As if a normal person would ever believe that Yaron agrees with Caplan just because he was silent when Caplan was saying something. You know, as an interviewer, you're not always in debate mode. That's obvious to anyone who understands interviews. You're not there to like cause a scene and make your guest feel, completely uncomfortable and then maybe want to leave. And you want to get as much as you can get out of your guest and be nice to him so that, you have a polite conversation. And that's an obvious understanding from people who understand interviews. But Yaron doesn't think that way. He's always worried about what the audience is going to think of him. And just because he's associating with someone in an interview.
Yeah. I mean, he claims nothing Bryan said was bad, but, Yaron disagreed with it, supposedly. But he didn't respond properly, even when he felt he should have. So what's a morally perfect mop-up operation in such a case? Erase the evidence. I mean,
Yeah,
I just think he's inclined to rewrite reality to remove any blemishes. And it's just like, him banning us. I mean, he bans reality. That's what erasing tapes is about.
Yeah, he likes to erase reality when he can. So he bans us so that we can't point out his problems, and so therefore he's erased us. We're no longer an issue in his chat room, and then he erases this interview he did, or at least the segment of the interview he did, so that people can't go back and find it, even though he messed up and left it on Facebook. He thinks he's
the same thing with the Caplan interview. I got a copy already.
Yeah. So he thinks he's erasing reality, but as we know, people have memories and people remember things. And so even if you manage to kick us out of the chat room or whatever, people know that we have Facebook pages and they can go and read our comments about Yaron. They can come to our podcast and listen to what we have to say. So he can't ban everything that's negative or what he doesn't like. He needs to get out of this mode of evasion, of evading us, evading what Caplan said on his show, evading all the facts that point to him being a bad representative of objectivism. That's the whole mirror thing, and why I say that he probably breaks every mirror in his house, because he just can't look at himself or his words and deal with it. People make mistakes. I've made mistakes. Damn, I voted for Hillary Clinton over Trump. That was a huge mistake, and I learned from it. But I don't try to erase that fact. I didn't go back to my posts, social media posts, and try to erase all evidence that I voted for Hillary Clinton. That would be ridiculous.
But that hurts his objectivity. When he decides everything Netanyahu does must be bad, or everything Trump does must be bad, he just has to go in and then just make whatever facts on the ground comport to his preconceived notion of reality.
Well, I don't know if he's trying to make it comport to his notion of reality.
Like Netanyahu, they killed the Hamas political leader. I don't even know how he's going to react today, but I predict he'll say, "Oh yeah, it's okay, but Netanyahu's still got to go."
Yeah, I mean, there might. I'm not going to get into his mindset here or motivations too much. What I think is just going on is that he doesn't like what he said in the past. I mean, I'm going based on what he says. He didn't like what he said, or he failed to say something, and so he's deleting that. He doesn't like it when he screws up, and he doesn't like the evidence of his mistakes. So
Yeah,
he
he
tries.
said that regret serves no useful purpose.
Yeah, he doesn't like to regret, like the Scientologists never regret what you do. It's like it's kind of weird the way
Just
that
never admit you're wrong.
yeah, even he can do that. He's capable of doing that if you
When
give
it's
him
obvious.
enough. When you give him enough super chat money, I guess he'll do it. But he doesn't like doing it, and then he regrets doing it afterward, and then tries to scrub it from the internet. But he'll talk about it. It's not like he denies ever doing it, right? But he does try to limit people's ability to discover him saying these things or not saying things in Kaplan's case. So he's
May he
got a.
treat you as objectively.
Well, that's the thing. He also doesn't want to get into your details. He's not interested in the details. So he will ignore all the details about you and then come to these hasty generalizations based on his fantasy of you. And then he'll
Yeah, me
ignore.
and Trump are just sitting around figuring out how we can hurt the objectivist movement.
Exactly. So that's a fantasy of his, and it'll live on in his fantasy world as long as he ignores all the details and all the real particulars. But then he ignores it. He ignores it in you, and he ignores it in himself. So he just can't face particulars because they will prove his generalizations or his abstractions wrong. So he'll then be confronted with the contradictions, and he can't handle that.
Yeah, that's true. And there's a ban. So we are going to pivot back to our previous show about moral perfection that we've been planning for a while. And we'll do that probably in a couple weeks. Maybe we'll have some guests on in the future. But I think this was a great discussion, just putting it out there, at least answering his ridiculous charges. And any final thoughts from you?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that we sort of have different ideas on why he blocked us, but it could be the case that he blocked us for different reasons. It's like you are much more involved in his chat room and his show. I think you've even given him super chat money.
Right.
I don't have that much interaction with him. I pop on occasionally and make some comments that he doesn't like, but I don't donate to his show. Don't give him super chats. So in your case, he may have tolerated your existence more. Like, even though we did that show about him smearing you and how he's a bad representative of objectivism, he tolerated that from you because you're a contributor, but I'm not. So he just automatically blocked me. He doesn't care about me. Once we did that show, I think he decided that's enough. I'm not going to have Swig on here anymore.
Well, hey, sorry you got sucked into my blowback.
No, I think it's my fault. I think, like I say, I think he blocked us for different reasons. And
well, he said the show was a factor in the show we did on him. So once he decided to block me, I mean, yeah, he just he had like some previous personal thing with you anyway, from what I could tell.
Well, he does make reference to some horrible things I did in the background. I wish he would elaborate on that because I'm not clear on what he means. There could be a couple different things he's referencing. Now, I don't think they're horrible, but I think he didn't like them. So
we're not even sure what he said.
I do have personal history with him at ARI. So if he goes into that, I'm prepared to discuss his issues. But we'll see. We'll see how far he takes it. I wish he'd just leave it to his show, and our disagreements with him leading the movement, because I don't think anything else is relevant unless he wants to bring it up.
Good. Well, it's always good to leave a little something in the tank. So great. Well, I think this was a good episode. It was fun, cathartic, and so we'll look forward to the next one. In the meantime, I'm Scott Schiff, along with William Swig. This has been the Ayn Rand Fan Club, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.